You know, ladies and gentlemen, it was a time in the 1970s and 80s where mafia dons and leaders would decide to knock off people. They figured disrespected them, or basically were trying to take them out. Now, the weirdest case I think I've ever heard of, and only wrapped up recently because of the initial target of the hit wasn't murdered, but his father was. So today we're going to be talking about the curious case and the near-death experience of one William Aronwald, who was a target of a botched mob hit. He died at age 79 just a few months ago, December 5th, 2000. Now, he died on October 29th of that year, but the article I'm quoting from Neil Genslinger, he's probably one of the most prominent mafia writers for the New York Times. According to his article, I'm doing verbatim, William I. Aronwald died on October 29, 2020. If not for the ineptitude of a couple of mob hitmen, he might have never made it out in the 1980s. At the time, he was a noted professor in the 1970s and later a defense lawyer in prominent cases, and was inadvertently a central figure in one of the most odd, most gruesome tales from a period where organized crime in New York was particularly brazen. In 1987, two hitmen who had been dispatched by a mobster named Joel Kakasi to kill Mr. Aronwald mistakenly tracked his father, George, instead. On March 20th, one of them shot George to death in a laundry in Queens, then jumped in the getaway car led by the second man. It was years before investigators pieced together what had apparently happened. George, who was 78, was a part-time hearing officer for the city's Parking Violations Bureau, who also had a law practice, and he and William shared a listing in the Manhattan office directory. Mr. Kakasi, acting on the orders of an imprisoned crime boss, Carmine Persico, had arranged to have William Aronwald killed, according to news accounts. The reasons were vague. Mr. Persico was said to have thought Mr. Aronwald had been disrespectful, as one article put it. Mr. Aronwald later speculated that he had been targeted retaliation for his testimony in one of the trials of the mobster of all people, John Gotti. In any case, the prosecutor said later, the hitmen, brothers named Vincent and Eddie Serini, were shown a piece of paper with only the name Aronwald on it. They killed the wrong one, and that wasn't all. A 2003 article in the New York Times reported, after the botched assignment, Mr. Kakasi had his hitmen killed, prosecutor said. Then, he added, he had the hitmen who had killed the hitmen killed. Are you keeping up with me? The hitmen killed Aronwald, hitman killed the hitman, and then hitman killed the hitman. Now, William Aronwald has always suspected that his father took bullets meant for him. It was difficult in any circumstances, he told the Times in 2003, as details of the case came to light when prosecutors brought an array of charges against Mr. Kakasi. But it makes it more difficult when he was basically an innocent victim of something that was intended for me. That just makes it more painful. Now, Mr. Aronwald, who went on to a long career in the law, died of cardiac arrest near his home in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, at the age of 79. Now, the son was born on November 11, 1940 in Brooklyn, and his mother, Estelle, was a legal secretary and homemaker. So, the idea of the case of John Gotti being brought down or brought to justice all came through a series of lawyers and prosecutors that were working together to bring them down. Now, Mr. Aronwald, the junior, served in the Army from 65 to 67 with assignments in El Paso and on Okinawa. He was an assistant DA in Manhattan from 67 to 71, then joined the Justice Department, where he worked with the Joint Strike Force against organized crime on mob-related cases in and around New York. His name turned up in news reports for the period under headlines like reputed crime leader indicted for tax evasion and 16 indicted here in payoff racket and meat industry. Now, in December of 74, he became head of that strike force, a post he held until the unit was disbanded in 76. He then spent a year as head of the criminal division for the United States Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York before entering private practice. Now, some of his clients were the types of people he once prosecuted. Now, when his father was shot, he was representing an informer whose information led to other things. A bribery investigation at the Parking Bureau, the same agency where his father worked. but investigators determined that it was just a coincidence. The U.S. Attorney for Manhattan at the time, Rudolph Giuliani, said the senior Mr. Aronwald was not connected to any of the bribery allegations. Other theories of what led to the killing were pursued. Investigators reviewed thousands of traffic cases that had been presided over by George Aronwald, looking for a scofflaw who might have been disgruntled enough over a parking fine to commit murder. They examined whether George Aronwald had been mistaken for Joey Gallo, a mobster, or for a state Supreme Court justice, both of whom lived in the area of Queens where the assassination occurred. The case that finally brought out the details of the botched hit resulted in a 20-year sentence for Mr. Kikese. At his sentencing, the junior Mr. Aronwald argued that Mr. Kikese should be incarcerated far from New York to make it difficult for him to see family members, since he has deprived the Aronwald family of the chance to enjoy its patriarch's old age. They should suffer some measure of the grief and pain that my sister, myself, and her family have been made to suffer because of him. We lost the ability to spend time with him, for him to see his family grow and develop. Now, as a defense lawyer, Mr. Aronwald was part of other headline-making cases. In the early 1990s, he was among the lawyers who defended Carolyn Warmus, a former elementary school teacher in Westchester County, New York, who was accused of killing the wife of a fellow teacher with whom she had had an affair, a case that often drew comparisons to the movie Fatal Attraction. The defense was unsuccessful. A jury convicted her in 1992, and she was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and she was paroled in 2019. Now, Mr. Aronwald fared better as part of the team defending Carrie Kennedy, a daughter of Bobby Kennedy, who had faced a misdemeanor charge of driving while impaired in 2012. She contended that she was under the influence of a sleeping medication that she had taken accidentally, mistaking it for a thyroid medication. A jury acquitted her in 2014. So the idea of the mafia messing up, at the time it was a free-for-all. People were getting murdered left or right. What he calls second and third lieutenants were getting knocked off. Hitman was getting knocked off. Donald Trump was involved. Giuliani was involved directly and indirectly. You had the Montreal Mafia, you had the Hamilton Mafia, you had the Windsor Mafia, you had the Whitey Bulger Mafia stirring the pot. You had the Garbage Mafia, Construction Mafia, all kind of craziness. But all I know, ladies and gentlemen, if you have to kill the hitman who killed the hitman who killed by mistake, it's getting complex. And that's why the New York Mafia kind of burned itself out, because, again, immature and misdirected. If you're going to kill somebody, make sure you have a picture of the person, not just a name. That makes sense, right? I think it would. Have a good day. Bye.